Let's talk about how to decide if you want to calorie cycle.
Yes.
So we've talked about the pros and cons of calorie cycling, but like, how do you know if you actually like want to calorie cycle outside of the pros and cons,
Yep.
right? And so some of the questions that you want to reflect and ask yourself would be like, where are your current calories? Because that's going to play a massive difference. And the reason being is like, for example, like if you're currently in a calorie deficit, well, when it comes to calorie cycling, guess what? You are taking calories from your other days and you are stacking them on one or two higher calorie days.
So like having higher calories in a single day, like that sounds
Oh,
great.
it's amazing,
But
but
if
it's
that
not like,
means, but that means that if you have low calories on other days and they go to lower calories, it may not make life enjoyable and it may lead to lack of adherence. Because if
yep.
it's already like, hey, look, I feel like my calories are really low, I'm doing everything I can to hit them. Reducing calories even more on certain days to have, you know, a higher amount on one days may lead to a sketchy situation.
Yeah. And so if you like as you're doing this, you're like, oh, depending on how many calories or what percentage of calories you migrate to those higher days, looking to see like, okay, if I migrate this percentage of calories to these higher days, how many calories does that leave me with on my lower calorie days? And if it looks like it's like those are some poverty calories, I'm gonna eat my fingers off. That's probably not a good idea.
And so it sounds backwards, but one of the ways that I kind of look at it is like, oh, like how do I feel? Like if I'm eating even calories across the week, like how do I feel? Do I feel like I can actually tighten it up or like go deeper, eat less? And
Mhm.
if I'm feeling pretty good, then it's like, all right, like maybe I can migrate some of those calories over to a specific day or a few days to be able to enjoy a little bit more food because I know that like with my current calories, it doesn't feel like a struggle. So I'll use that to kind of gas it a little bit.
Yep. And this also comes into play as you're, starting to, we'll say, play with the percentages. And so making sure like, okay, in the previous weeks, you had migrated 7% of your calories to higher calorie days. And you can reflect back and look and see like, huh, how did I feel on those lower calorie days that I was consuming 7% less? And then how did I feel on my higher calorie days where I was consuming 7% more? Like, was that a good amount? Was it not enough? Was it too much? And so then that allows you to decide, oh, hey, you know what? I could eat a little bit less on these days and I could eat a little bit more on these days. And obviously, like your food choices are going to play a factor in that. So, like if you're having lower calories, and on those lower calorie days, you're like, I'm still going to eat pizza, like, ooh, you might be like not setting yourself up for success because like pizza doesn't take up a lot of room in your stomach.
Even if you aren't eating pizza, but if it was just like, oh, cool, like I'm gonna migrate some of my calories and I'll just eat a little bit less of the same food. Sometimes that can lead to feeling like you're not eating a
Yep.
lot or being even hungry. So
Yep.
like sometimes when you do make those shifts, it makes sense to look at different foods for those lower calorie days. So that way, even when you are eating lower calories, doesn't necessarily feel like you're eating way less food.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's like, all right, like shifting the food choice may make it towards, oh, this is extremely doable or sustainable. I could do that. Maybe you feel like, oh, I could push even further. I can do
For
this
sure.
and rock it till the wheels fall off because I
Hmm.
feel really
Yeah,
good.
that would be like changing your rice to potatoes to cauliflower rice. Like it's going to be different. And obviously, it's going to be dependent on how you actually feel eating those foods and how many calories you are working with.
And even if it's not just like rice to veggies, even some of your veggies changing by themselves, it's like,
Yep.
all right, like if you're having corn and green beans, those are a little bit starchier, and you can switch over to,
Like cucumbers and
yeah, and then it's like,
zucchini.
oh, cool. Like it's still a side of veggies, except for you can eat 5 times as many cucumbers. So it's like, all right, this feels really good.
Hmm. And then another like thing to think about is like, do you enjoy eating a larger amount of calories on certain days? And are there maybe particular foods that you would like to eat either a larger volume of, or just like something that takes up a lot more calories regardless of the volume? Because like for instance, like if you do want to eat pizza, like having it on a higher calorie day can allow you to eat more pizza, or you could eat your regular amount of pizza, but then also still enjoy the other foods that you want to eat. But this comes down to like, how do you like to feel when you're eating? Like, Do you like, and this even plays a factor in like the lower calorie foods that you're choosing. So do you like that my stomach is full and expanded feeling, or do you like just a little bit of like, oh, I'm content and I'm happy?
And
Uh,
also, like, to some degree, like, they're like, part of the reason this is so difficult for some people is like there's a lot of moving
there
parts,
is.
right? So take it one step at a time. Don't try to get overwhelmed. But one of the things to consider, especially if it is something like pizza, is like what's available, right? Because if it's like, oh, like, cool, I would be good with eating a single slice, but there's
Totally.
nowhere around you that you could just buy a slice of pizza. It's like, oh, like, are you going to have the willpower, the discipline to like, oh, I'm going to buy a pizza and only eat a slice? And if it's like, all right, like if there's nowhere around you that you can conveniently get a slice that you enjoy, because you're also always like, oh, I'll get a slice and you hate it. But it's like, all right, cool. Like there is a place that I really like that I can get a smaller size pizza, and I'll enjoy the entire thing, or maybe half today and half tomorrow. Then it may make sense to migrate calories accordingly so that way you can do so. So it's like taking a look at all of those things to kind of fit where it's like, all right, if it is something like pizza and you do want to have two or three slices because, or a small pizza, because that's what's available, that's what you like, then that may make sense to be able to work it into your intake.
Yeah, and so there is no like right or wrong with any of this, and it literally is like it is preferential, because like what you enjoy is going to be different than what we enjoy. I know, like when we had first started doing, our measuring and tracking and guesstimating and all these different things, like we enjoyed fitting in fun foods like every single day, and then we allowed ourselves, we'll say, even more like flexibility and freedom and
Tested
experimentation,
out different ways of doing it.
tested it out because we're like, oh, like this is fun, but like I kind of want to eat like a bigger portion. Like I don't want to eat just half cookie. I'd like to eat the whole cookie.
Because there was times like when we first started, like, I mean, granted, these were like outrageously sized brownies, but it's like, oh, we'd
Oh
get a
yeah.
brownie, we would split a quarter of the brownie. So like
A
there,
quarter was like it was like a quarter pound
yeah. And
for
so like
ounces.
so like, oh, it sounds like, oh, I'm not gonna split like, but like it was still decent. I was like, the size of a normal brownie or two.
Yeah.
Um, but then like in testing different ways of doing it, that's like, oh, like I actually would really like enjoy eating half to myself, but that takes up considerable amount of calories. That's not something that either one of us could do daily. So it's like, all right, then the way that we enjoyed it was very different.
Yeah. And so identifying, and asking yourself, like, how is it that you want to enjoy your food and what are the foods that you want to enjoy? And will calorie cycling help you do that?
And sometimes, yeah, when you do this, be willing to think outside the box even more. Because going back to our brownie experiences, sometimes that we're most successful is when we actually had that for breakfast.
Yep.
So most people are like, oh, like that's outrageous, or like you got to have a good like whatever. But it's like, all right, it's a decent amount of calories, sets us up with a decent amount of energy, and then we could have a more protein focused, lunch and dinner, and it actually worked out really well for us. So if it is even something like working in, a brownie or a piece of cake or a treat, sometimes think a little bit outside the box. Will I actually do better if I have this for breakfast? Like, who knows? Maybe we're just weird and that worked for us. But saying it, whereas, like, hey, if you're doing this, like, and you're testing stuff out, be willing to push the limits and test. It's not just like, oh, and same thing. Maybe the cake that you're having and that you want, that is dinner. It doesn't have to be dinner and dessert, but like testing it for yourself to see how to make this work.
Yep. But if you have any questions, be sure to submit a burning question or apply for a breakthrough session.